Welcome to Spooky Action at a Distance television show. I'm your host, Kyle Finley, and you're tuning into the best show east, west, south, and north of the Rockies. Today's topic is going to be alien communication, and I'm here with my guest, Steve Snodgrass. How you doing, Steve?
Kyle, you told me to tell you that I'm doing great, and I mean it. I'm doing great. Do you get my meaning?
You're doing great. What does that mean? I'm not picking up on this.
Well, that's exactly the topic of this show, isn't it? That if we're to establish ever some kind of contact with an extraterrestrial species, we're going to have to know about our way of communicating and how we communicate to begin with before we're going to make any progress.
Yeah.
I think that should make sense.
I like how we were also talking before the show. We're kind of on different opinions on this, where I'm more like, if there's an alien species out there, it's going to be harder than heck to communicate with them. It's going to be very impossible, I would say. Right. But you kind of came from the other position on that, right?
Right. I think there's more evidence to suggest that if we share some kind of common reality, we will have maybe what Plato called the three elements of a soul. You didn't know I was going to go with this.
I did not.
Kyle,
going way out there.
But Plato suggested that we have reason, we have will, which he also called spirit, and appetites. And so presumably any intelligent being would have the ability to reason, would have some sort of will or spirit that animates them, and has certain appetites, certain needs. Now we hope that they aren't the needs for destruction and, and so forth, but...
Well, but you look at just here on the planet Earth, communicating between, people from different countries, we speak different languages. Even if you can speak their language, the words have different meanings, double meanings. How you say it, inflections make a big difference. In every culture, it's kind of a little bit different, so...
Well, and even with speaking the same language that we do, there's a Moravian study that everybody's familiar with it once you understand what the meaning is, and that is people understand 7% of the words you say, about 20% of the tone and the pitch and the volume of your voice, and then the rest, some 60-70%, is nonverbal communication.
It's all about the body language. You got to speak with your hands.
So if I start rolling up my sleeves and taking off a watch and ask you, hey, how you doing, Kyle? If that's not consistent, if not those three things, the words I'm saying, the tone of my voice and the way I'm saying it, and my nonverbal behavior, if those things aren't consistent, we get lost in the shuffle. We don't have clear communication. So clear communication in the English language at least means when two people arrive at some sense of mutual understanding. You have, not to make this personal, Kyle.
You're making it personal. I'm going to take it personal right now.
But you have noise going on in your head right now. The idea of the cameras and the lights, and are we coming across correctly?
You're adding a lot of pressure to me right now.
I'm thinking about Valentino's pizza right now. I have a lot of noise going on in my mind. You have a lot of noise perhaps going on in your mind.
No, I'm all Zen Buddhism, I'm one state of mind.
You're right there. Well, and so we have to understand that there's all the noise that's between us, the noise that's going to be the channels of communication that I send out, which I just mentioned, my nonverbal, the way I say it, and the actual words that I say, and how you're picking up on all that language. At some point, it's going to cause a resonance, and you're going to say, I get what you mean. Well, hopefully.
Yeah.
But it really is a mystery that two physically separate beings, not to mention the audience and whoever happens to be watching this, could use their way about themselves, call it their reason, their will, and their appetites, or call it what it is, to express themselves in a way that two separate I's, my I and your I, become a we, as in we understand each other and we've formed something that's if you want to use frequency language, some kind of we've resonated, we're together.
Yeah.
Two I's become a we.
They become a united kind of idea and how they see the world. And
right.
Such.
And when we mentioned, I think on a number of episodes ago, the idea of telepathy, how people could communicate across distances, the way we try to determine if telepathy exists is if we eliminate as many of those channels as possible.
And one of those options might be the spooky action at a distance.
Well, you know right where I'm headed. And what we didn't get to finish in that episode, at least in discussing telepathy, was my opinion really if there is a spooky action at a distance or an entanglement component to anything. When it comes to communication, I think it really is when these two I's form a we, then there's a resonance, there's an understanding, the spin of your quantum particles or whatever and mine come into harmony somehow. Okay,
do you really think it has to do more with the particles, or does it have to do just with, two people kind of thinking the same way? Is it really like a combined force, or is it more just two people, two independent things that act in the same manner?
I think it's exactly a resonance metaphor or a frequency metaphor when the combination of my body language and my tone and my words come into some kind of reflection or a remembrance, you could call it. I get that, I knew that before. Some kind of ability to come into harmony that way, I think there's got to be some sort of physical basis for that, if there's at least a mental basis as we understand each other.
Okay, yeah. I'll give you that.
Well, and so if...
I just say, kind of leap into the spooky action thing, which we talked about before, ruling out all other possibilities, that seems a very plausible one. But is that necessarily does it have to be that, or are we just looking at other things and it kind of looks like it?
It's the best idea I think we've got going that I can come up with, and a lot of times philosophy of language, the philosophy of science is driven by new scientific discoveries we make. And when we talked a number of episodes ago about the simulation hypothesis, underlying matter is mostly empty space. When we visited about the Big Bang
You're saying
theory,
like particles, there's not a lot of actual mass into it. It's mostly space. Well, on a very subatomic level, the particles are separated by a great distance.
Right, and mostly empty space. And then given that the best science tells us right now that at one point everything was sort of at least in one singular state.
It was all one. We were all one, Steve.
That this is a rediscovery and a reharmonizing, and every little time you have mutual understanding with someone, you're coming a little bit closer to truth, if you could call it that.
You know Richard Feynman, right?
I love Richard Feynman.
I remember there was one where lecture that he was doing where he's talking about entropy and how the universe is breaking apart. It just keeps getting more complicated over time. But eventually, if throughout the entire time in the universe, that it should come back together somehow, just randomly.
Right.
But right now everybody's seeing it as it's just expanding. Everything's just getting more complicated. We're not seeing the unifying factor yet.
Right, and yet what we know, the more we peer into the atom, we don't see in the quantum state separation. What we see is an underlying unity. And
what do you mean by that? Communicate with me, as if I was an alien.
The idea is rather like what we come up with in terms of quantum physics as I understand it. So we believe this table, this fine-looking table here, and all of we're made of matter. And physics is all about separating things, understanding the difference between this type of substance and that type of substance. When you're talking to me, I'm a you to you, and you're a you to me.
Relativity.
Physics is all about separation, and we think that we're understanding more about the world the more we divide it and chop it up. But what
Well, we
we
do,
find,
right?
right, and in sort of, I guess what you could call a relative state, ultimately there is this oneness and an origination of some kind. There's not two things that are separate. However, in an absolute sense. In a relative sense, yes, you're sitting right across from me, I'm sitting right across from you, and the camera's over there, and the guys are in the back working the buttons and fiddling with the knobs and stuff.
Fiddling with the knobs. They're just
like that.
fiddling with their thumbs, really. No, I'm just
Well, and I guess if we do turn this to aliens for part of it,
let's get it back to alien communication.
I honestly believe that we need to understand a lot more inward in terms of our inner space in understanding how we communicate if we're ever going to apply that to speaking with another species. The only thing that we have really going so far as a semblance of communication that's anything tangible is this idea of crop circles. And I think you had a crop circles image at some point to look at.
Well, most crop circles, as they've investigated them, have been kind of like hoaxes and stuff. But I was just bringing it up as one form of communication. If an alien comes here and they put a crop circle, what are they going to put? Are they going to have an alphabet? Are they going to have a picture? We see pictures, it's got designs. You can interpret it a million different ways. It can mean this, it can mean that. Who knows what it means?
Right. And so if you look at this image here that was on the screen, there's who are the guys who were doing the board stomping? Dave and some other guy. I don't remember. Randy and
Well,
Dave.
there's been a lot of people. They do it as an artistic kind of thing.
And there's ongoing discussion about, well, are these all hoaxes? And there's enough reason to believe, I think, that not all of them are hoaxes. And so if so, what is it's a geometric kind of communication?
I'll step in a little bit as the assistant director for MUFON of Nebraska.
Okay.
We investigated these a little bit for, I know over in Iowa we had Greg, look at them. But some of the ones that we think that aren't hoaxes are just the plain circle ones with no design whatsoever. Okay. Just a flattened circle, and that one there, it's unexplainable, and so we call it a crop circle. It's not that it's an alien came down and they did some kind of beam thing or something like that and it made a crop circle. It's just like, it's unexplainable. So.
Right, and when they become unexplainable, there's either the pseudoscience approach to it, to say, well, if we don't know, what are we going to do with that? Something that's unexplainable.
Because that could also be, somebody out there with the boards doing it, but you see weird magnetic flux data, you see, radiation coming from there that shouldn't be there, and how the stalks are bent is, different from how it would look from a board stomping, so.
Right, and so if that's the only thing we have to go on now is either a crop circle as some sort of physical communication, because the rest seems to be all mental.
Yeah.
And if there are, one of my favorite physicists, you mentioned Richard Feynman, so Roger Penrose.
He's got to be your favorite one. You always bring him up.
Everybody needs to have a favorite physicist, and if you're watching a show like this, you have to have a favorite physicist. What am I going to say? Roger Penrose, in some of his theories, has decided that there are the three worlds, three mysteries hypothesis. There's a physical world, a mental world, and then what he calls a Platonic world referring to mathematics. And Stephen Hawking, he actually won the Wolf Prize with Stephen Hawking. I think when we notice Stephen Hawking doesn't have the best attitude towards aliens. Intelligent aliens,
Yeah, he was saying that,
humanity.
yeah.
That's,
much like when any two civilizations meet, across a vast distance, the technology difference is quite substantial. So it's, one usually just bulldozes the other one. And if we found aliens and we communicated with them, he thinks it would be devastating to us.
It tends to go poorly. And so sort of the third idea as we come through, so SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and the initial Voyager spacecraft that went off with the gold record that was Carl Sagan's idea.
Well, yeah, so that is an example, like a kind of a two-way, well, that'd be a one-way communication when we're sending out the Voyager with the disk, right?
Yes, right.
And then the other thing that SETI does is they do the listening program where they don't send out any information. We're just listening for a signal that might be,
because the presumption has been that if there's anything we might have in common, we might not have a physical world in common, we might not have a mental world in common, but gosh, at least mathematics. Mathematics is the type of thing that doesn't change. And so it's in Carl Sagan's film Contact, we're looking for prime numbers, right? We're looking for a Fibonacci numbers, a Fibonacci sequence of numbers. And so when SETI, did we have the graphic of that?
Yeah, I don't know if they put it up yet, but.
But that's what SETI's looking for.
The signals, repeating patterns in such a format.
Patterns. And we start to look at various kinds of symbology and things like that.
There you go. That's the one.
So something along those lines that would distinguish it from any other background noise that we're aware of.
Yeah.
And so if we dig a little deeper into mathematics, that's what I spent my week sort of thinking about. I'm not saying, all the time, because I do.
You do other stuff.
I do go out and I cut down trees after that storm last night and things like that. But there's ongoing debate. What is mathematics? Now,
Who debates this? I don't debate this. I've never heard anybody debate this.
Let me tell you what the debate is, Kyle.
Please, because I just couldn't, wait to hear somebody debating about what math is.
So, like, what's a 2? Well, there was a Bill Cosby bit. I don't know if it's appropriate to bring up Bill Cosby, but in elementary school, Bill Cosby's, he needs to go to the restroom, and the teacher asks him, you have to go 1 or 2? He says, what's a 1? What's a 2? We're here, 2 plus 2 is 4, right? Yeah, exactly. 2 plus 2 is 4, that's great. What's a 2? And so we reference a piece of paper here, a piece of paper there. There's 1, there's 2. Those are numerical sequences of numbers. So what is mathematics if not an ability to describe the physical world incredibly? If we look at triple integral calculations, when I was interested I asked some friends of mine, I'm going to be on the show this week. What are some topics that you think would be good to discuss? And one person, kind of in a smart alecky way, says, how about triple integrals? And so I thought, oh, good Lord, what are triple integrals? And so with about 10, 15 minutes of research, what are they good for and what are the pitfalls is what somebody had suggested. Triple integrals are good for determining the volume of a space and the density within that space. In other words, physical space. Am I pretty close?
Yep.
So what I mentioned about the debate is, and you can do a lot of YouTube searches on
Apparently
this.
He communicated very well to you, is what
yes,
we get from
absolutely. And so what is mathematics? Is mathematics physical? Here are the 4 possibilities that are thrown out. Mathematics is physical. In other words, matter and the rest of this is somehow caused by mathematics. Physical reality
would
is
this
caused.
be a 1? Is this a 1?
Something like that.
Something like that.
But in other words, mathematics are either physical.
Yeah.
In other words, we discover them. We discover theorems. If I remember
correctly, how they explain it is like math basically runs the world, and then like the world is what we see. So there's an underlying math that's physically there.
I'm with you, Kyle. I'm seeing.
Hopefully, everybody else is with us too. It's a very hard concept to kind of picture because when you think, math 1, 2, it's all abstract numbers. It's stuff on paper. You don't see a 1. You don't see a 2. You don't even know how they, work together. But how they explain it in the physical world is that it's there, and then we see the results of that, which are, physical objects.
Right. And so that leads naturally into the second possibility. We have mathematics is physical. There's a deep relationship between the physical world and mathematics, and it's our process of discovering theorems that happens. The second possibility is that mathematics is mental, that somehow the mathematics as we discover theorems or as we look at theorems that it's a mental process that human beings do.
Yeah, and how I'd see that is the physical world is there, and then as we look at it as humans with brains, we see two objects and we just mentally make a two. That's two objects.
Right.
So there's no connection to the actual physical world, with physics and all that stuff.
Right, so we have physical, we have mental, the
And we're on board
mathematics,
there.
the third possibility, abstract.
Oh, that's a
That
good
they're
one.
abstract entities, they're neither
I understand
physical,
that. You don't even need to explain it. Abstract.
neither physical nor mental. That's what I think basically what abstract
Okay, so what is that?
What's abstract?
Yeah, it's not physical, not mental. That's the
Right.
question they often pose, and people can't really answer
Right,
that.
and it's abstract. What's an abstract to a paper? There's different meanings of that, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But as I recalled, so as we're imagining what aliens might be, and we had met before and given a fine presentation down at the folks at First National Bank at the big building in downtown Omaha.
Yep.
That
And at
there-
Anthony Steakhouse and at Project,
right.
all over the place. Best presentation ever. Everybody loves it.
we explored the logical possibilities, right, of what aliens are. Number one, they're physical.
Mm-hmm.
They just are very hard to see, or very good at not being seen, or we don't have some taxonomic classification for them, that they're physical beings arriving here on spacecraft or beaming here or whatever. The second possibility is what most people think they are. Aliens are mental, that we've imagined them, they're created by the human mind as a result of fears or hopes, or when technology changes and becomes so advanced, we don't know what to make of it. And this explains why the Ancient Aliens series is now in its 12th season, if you can imagine that.
You're not allowed to mention them on here. We don't.
I apologize, I forgot the rules.
unless they're going to sponsor us, which I don't think they.
And that third possibility, so as we're thinking aliens, they're either physical, they're mental,
Well,
or
basically it comes down to they're real but rare is the first one. The second one is that they're not real, they're not physically there. And the third one, go ahead.
that they're autonomous but not physical, that somehow they're autonomous beings. In other words, they aren't fabricated by the human mind, but they're not physical either. They have an autonomous ability to communicate with us, but they're neither physical nor mentally fabricated. That makes them more abstract, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if you
I
can
think
see
that-
where
I
I'm
think
going
that-
with this,
that worked out well.
mathematics has a lot to do with aliens. I'm kind of sensing this when we're thinking about mathematics. It kind of lines up to sort of our best ideas when it comes to what mathematics is. Physical, mental, if we could call it autonomous, so that it's abstract, hard to come up with. Or the fourth possibility is a non-realism approach in math, which is that they're fictional.
Yeah.
Which is probably what most people think of when it comes to aliens, and why you get on a third rail and we get ridiculed for even having an interest in extraterrestrials, that they're fictional. All
right, so with all that display on math here and the debate and what math is and what aliens are, where are we with alien communication? So you think that by using math we can communicate with aliens? Because we can't even communicate with each other, as you said, with math alone.
Right.
What is a 2? What is a 3?
Well, and there's been effort in this. An astrobiology conference that just occurred in Mesa, Arizona. Forget the name of the doctor, but if you look up this astrobiology conference sponsored by NASA, there's a mathematician who believes he's come up with the beginnings of a formal language that we might be able to use to communicate. Now, we'd be able to communicate maybe insofar as a yes and a no.
Is that using binary? Like I got a good picture of binary?
Oh, like if you would imagine a hydrogen atom either happens, a hydrogen atom, what is it, 1 proton and 1 electron or something like that. So we would have presumably chemistry in common with aliens.
See, that's something that I would disagree with. Is I got a picture on there. If you got the Zerg, it's a fictional alien race that's just kind of like a. Yeah, there we go. It's just kind of you can't really. How are you going to communicate with that? Now, it can't really speak, you can't really, shake its hands. Can't really do much with it, which I love StarCraft 2 for. They're very creative on how they come up with their aliens. But I'm like, we don't know enough about, aliens to be able to say, yeah, we can communicate, or yeah, we can't, or no, we can't communicate. Especially with math, but I don't know, what do you think about that?
Well, right, because if mathematics, then, if you're saying chemistry isn't even it, or we're not in the position to say hello or a greeting. The new movie that was out, Arrival, it's called The Arrival or Arrival, really had a lot to do with an alien that's so outside the norm that we wouldn't have any possibility of understanding any kind of grammar or syntax. We have to be able to understand where to begin communicating in reference to whatever we might have in common. And what gets difficult with images like the Zerg and the rest is we see, if you look at the electromagnetic spectrum, right, from infrared and microwaves to the tiny sliver of visible light that we see, all the way up to ultraviolet and then X-rays and cosmic rays and the rest, would we even be able to have the same visual spectrum? Now, if we get to that point, all bets are off. I guess I'm gonna end my comments by thinking about how I agree with you, Kyle.
I didn't mean to bring you down. No, I'm saying, that's just one of the main possibilities, I think, when it comes to alien communication. But we're coming to the end of our show here. I hope you had a great time.
I had a great time.
I don't know if we really concluded much on here other than you kind of agreed a little bit, but I'd like to thank everybody for watching. Thank you for being here. And I hope to see everybody. Keep watching the show. Follow us on Facebook.
Thank you.